All right. Good morning, everyone. We will start right at 10. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's Nexus Leadership and Innovation webinar series. We are so excited to have you join us for this engaging series. My name is Liz Mahalski, and I'm a program manager for Nexus at Michigan Engineering. I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. You are welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation by putting them in the chat or raising your hand via Zoom. However, there will be a dedicated question and answer period following the presentation. Now, I am very excited to announce our March speaker. We connected after our Nexus First Annual Women in Leadership Conference last year, and this presentation got rave reviews, and I am so thrilled that she is doing it again for our webinar series today. Today's speaker is Emily Morash. A multidisciplined, ever-curious professional, Emily cut her teeth in the nonprofit world, creating and launching organizations and strengthening existing operations. With a robust sense of purpose and an irrepressible sense of humor, she embraced the vast nonprofit sector with grace and fervor. After 2 successful decades in the nonprofit field, she shifted her focus to leadership and team development consulting with a heavy focus on empathy and mindfulness, founding Hampton Morash, LLC. We're also sharing her entrepreneurial and nonprofit management knowledge while teaching at the collegiate level. Emily teaches graduate courses for Johnson and Wales University and is the lead instructor for the Accelerated Training Center for Workforce Development at Columbus State Community College. She also has instructed workforce development and leadership development classes for the Community College of Rhode Island and Bryant University. She received a double BA in sociology and psychology from the University of Tennessee and earned her MS in community economic development from Southern New Hampshire University. Emily is a certified mediator, mindfulness, confidence, and REBT coach, everything DISC certified partner, 5 behavior certified partner, and the creator of Mindful Leader Practice, Origins of Identity, and Unfunk Yourself. She is a professional facilitator, public speaker, business consultant, and mediation coach. It is my pleasure to turn it over to you, Emily.
Thank you. And that was Unfunk with an N. I get in trouble sometimes with that title. People are like, what did you say? I'm like, oh yeah. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm excited to be here. I had a blast when I presented at the conference in the fall, and I'm thrilled to have been invited to come back. This topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I think to a lot of people once we sort of unpack it. Communication is the key to everything. All the relationships that we have, all of our business dealings, communication is the root of how we connect and engage. So we're going to kind of jump into that. The lens that I use when I do any of the workshops that I do or any of the presentations is the lens of mindfulness. And some of you are like, yeah, I've heard of that. It's become kind of a buzzword. And I don't want to dilute it. And I actually want to unpack it and really kind of look at all of the components of what mindfulness is. So the definition per Jon Kabat-Zinn, if you guys are familiar, if any of you are mindful practitioners or mindfulness practitioners, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's like the American granddaddy of mindfulness. So his definition is mindfulness is an awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. There's a whole lot going on in that description. And so at first glance, it's like, oh yeah, we're paying attention, like we're present and like we're not judging. But let's open that up a little bit. So first, awareness that arises. It's not the surface observation that we so often take as truth. Like right now, I can look outside my window. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I can look outside my window. The sun is shining. The sky is blue. The grass is greening up. And I can be like, oh, it's spring. Because then my first observation is, oh, look at that. If I walk outside right now, I will come right back in and put on a coat because it is 28 degrees. So my first observation isn't correct. So what we do is what we perceive at the surface level is not the whole truth about something or anything. The truth is under the surface, and through mindfulness and patience and thinking and asking questions and wondering, we allow our awareness of something to rise. The second piece is through paying attention on purpose. All right, stay with me here. This is not something that we do well naturally. Not that we don't pay attention, we do. But by design, our brains, to keep us safe from danger, are constantly reacting to our surroundings. So think about, you might actually be doing it now. If you're sitting in an office with other people around you, your ears are picking up what they're saying. Your eyes might be shifting to see like who's in front of you. If someone walks by your desk, more than likely, you're going to shift your vision for just a second to see who's walked by your desk. Our brains do this. It's a survival technique. It's totally normal. But we are consistently and persistently distracted by everything around us to keep us safe. When we're being mindful, you are stopping the distraction to pay attention to what it is that you're observing on purpose and with intent. That is so much easier said than done. So my challenge to you is like, next time you go to a coffee shop and you want to focus on your cup of coffee and the flavor or whatever, how hard is it for you to, and me, to actually focus, pay attention on purpose to that one thing without being distracted? Like right now, where's your cell phone? Where is, do you have it, it's right next to you, but you have it face down because we pretend then that we're not going to be distracted? Or do you have it face up? Are you nervous that like you're going to miss a call, or that someone, your kids might try to get a hold of you? This is totally normal. Humans crave distraction. So the practice of mindfulness is quite literally the intention and deliberate action of slowing down, pausing, and focusing. In the present moment, we would think that this is easy peasy, right? Like, I'm here, I'm at my desk, I'm on this call, I'm right here, except where's your brain? Are you thinking about the argument you had with your 10-year-old who refused to put on a hoodie this morning before he went to the bus stop? Or are you thinking about the meeting you have this afternoon at 2 because you've got to go meet with your boss, or maybe the person that you're having a hard time with? Are you ruminating about an argument that you had? Where is your brain? Is it actually here? You physically, your body's actually here, but where's your mind? So when we're being mindful, we are actually bringing ourselves right here to the present. We're not thinking about the past. We're not thinking about the future. We're thinking about right now. This is super challenging. I don't know if any of y'all in the room have ADHD. I like proudly talk about my ADHD because I wasn't diagnosed till I was 42. And so when I got diagnosed, I was like, oh, that explains so much. I have like swirls in my brain. They take off with my thoughts. And so there's a whole lot of pinging that goes along in my brain. And so that I can like control my thoughts and actually the anxiety that comes along with all the pinging thoughts, I adopted mindfulness a few years ago. But here's the hardest part. The last piece of mindfulness is non-judgmentally. So this means that when our awareness arises, when we're making a mindful observation or just observing what's happening, we are not assigning opinion or judgment to those thoughts. I think really this is the most challenging part of mindfulness practices, because we are mindlessly existing in our emotional brains a lot. So I'm going to stop here for just a second. And just go over here for a second. So our brains are, we have all of this beautiful processing space, right, in our frontal lobe, but our brains are actually driven by what we call our ancient brain or our basement brain. Some people call it the lizard brain. It is that survival instinct brain. And there's a specific part of it, it's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is this little almond-shaped part of your brain. It's pretty small. It's in the back bottom part of your brain. And that's where fight and flight live. And actually, there are 6 trauma responses that our brain activates when we are feeling threatened. And so there's fight, flight, freeze. Everybody knows those. There's also fawn, which is sort of like placating. There's faint, which is where people like legit shut down, have meltdowns. And there's flood. And flood happens when one stressful thing comes across your brain plane, and then every other stressful thing that you have going on like sort of piles on like a pig pile. So our amygdala gets activated when we feel physically threatened, right? Here's the fun fact about the human brain. Our brains, first of all, will interpret emotional stress in the same manner it interprets physical threat. So like your brain does not distinguish between being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and getting a one-line email from your boss that says, I need to see you in my office. Your brain is going to freak out the same way. Similarly, your brain doesn't know the difference between true and worry. So if you're ruminating about something that has happened, and you're constantly worrying about it, you're constantly thinking about it, and maybe it's something that actually hasn't happened, but you're worried it might happen, your brain is going to react the same way. You're going to still have that fight or flight. So where this comes back to the non-judgmentally piece is, once again, just like your brain is constantly distracted and you're looking around because you're actually looking to see if you're in danger, or you're looking for safe spaces or safe people, your brain is judging what it's seeing based on however you've defined it. So if you're sitting at your desk, I don't know, you guys I don't know if all of us are in the Midwest, but you know, tornadoes are a thing here. I moved here from New England. Tornadoes were not a thing. So if you look outside your window and the sky has gotten really like that weird gray green, and you're like, oh, your brain is going to judge that. And then you're going to take action based on whatever the judgment is. So getting back to the whole judgmentally thing, this isn't a shame conversation like shame on you for judging people. That's not it. It is understanding that your brain is constantly trying to figure out what is happening with who's around. And we're really expert at judging. We do it all the time. We're constantly judging. We might not be the best judges of character, but we're actually programmed to do this. And here's another fun fact. We're hardwired to connect to each other. We are wired to be social creatures, and socialization is actually part of our psychological health. I'm sure, I don't know. So I went to the University of Tennessee, and I have this thing whenever I see people here and I see like the big orange power tee, I'm like, oh, go Vols. And then like they'll respond, and we've just connected. I don't know these people. We have just connected over a similarity, and we're all looking to connect with other people. Once we connect with people, we feel safe. If we're not feeling connected, we don't feel safe. You ever walk into a room, like you've gone to a conference or a seminar or something, and you walk in the room and you don't know anybody, and you go like put yourself in like the furthest seat back in the room, or like way up front so that like nobody's around you because you don't know anyone. It makes you nervous. So we're constantly judging our situations. So non-judgmentally asks you to, again, in that pause and in that focus, to not assign judgment to whatever it is that you're observing or you're remembering or you're feeling. One more thing about how we function as humans, the human brain, because our brains are wired to keep us safe, we don't like uncertainty or ambiguity. When we're faced with uncertainty and ambiguity, we need to know answers. And this is all subconscious, you guys, or unconscious. This is not anything that we are consciously thinking about. When we're assigning judgment to something that we don't know, we are making an assumption. Like, I look outside, it looks like it's warm, and then I go outside and I learn better. I look at my coffee cup and I'm like, there's steam coming out of it, so my coffee's hot. So I'm making these judgments that help keep me safe. I'm making assumptions about things to keep me safe. And so we need answers, and we need to know the what, who, why, how, and like where and when of situations. If we don't know them immediately, we make up the answers and we believe them as truth, which is what an assumption is. And so, so the whole mindful piece, just to run back through awareness that arises because you're allowing yourself to think more deeply than at surface level through paying attention on purpose, being focused, present in the moment, not thinking about tomorrow, not thinking about yesterday, and non-judgmentally, just letting it happen. And so I think people are like, oh yeah, this makes total sense. And that's easy. But it's not necessarily easy. And this is why this is a practice. So I introduced this concept. And for those of you that have a mindfulness practice, like you're already in this. But for those of you who don't, and you're like, well, that seems real easy. The challenge is to really watch yourself in situations when, you know, you're around people you don't know, or you're in a meeting that you think might be a stressful meeting. It might be, it might not be, but how are you feeling? What are you doing? How are you observing? How are you judging? So it's just keeping these sorts of things in mind. And that's how you start to practice mindfulness. So I always ask this question. I'm actually going to let you guys chat because I like to hear people's ideas of what is communication. So like unmute. And so if a couple of you want to throw out some answers, what is communication? Oh gosh, not all of you at once. I just can't hear. How we interact. Who else has an idea? What is it? What's communication? Conveying an idea. Okay, what else? Y'all aren't wrong. I mean, I'm just wanting to gather some info. How we voice our concerns. I love that. Yep. Verbal and nonverbal cues. Ooh, Teresa. Mutual understanding, bi-directional information flow. Brandon, bi-directional information flow. I like that. What, any other thoughts on that? Well, you're all correct. So communication looks like a lot of things, and everything you just said was correct. It's teaching, preaching, directing, redirecting, lecturing, educating, negotiating, persuading, cheering somebody up, making somebody laugh, conveying ideas, seeking feedback. It's all communication. But the root of communication is actually connection and engagement. So when we talk about what is communication, it's connection and engagement. And a lot of times people are like, oh, it's talking through ideas and that sort of thing. And that's not necessarily incorrect. But we want to talk about this. So this goes back to our idea of mindfulness and the whole being present in the moment, non-judgmentally, because we want, as human beings, we actually need to feel connected. According to Matthew Lieberman, he wrote a book called Social. If you've never read it, it's fairly fascinating. Our need for connection is actually more important than our need for food and shelter. There was this really interesting experiment / research study that looked at primate babies, and they were in an enclosure with, there were two mom looking sort of mannequin things. Both had milk, so the babies could go nurse on either one of these. One was covered in fur and had, you know, eyes and like little glass eyes, whatever, and it looked real. The other one didn't have any fur or anything, and all of the primate babies went to the one with fur because it looked more connected, it looked more engaging, it looked safer. And so when we are feeling socially isolated, and not communicating and not connected, this causes significant mental and physical decompensation. And so why I bring this up is when we're in the workplace or in the community or at home or with family or whatever, and we're not feeling connected and we're not feeling engaged, guess what happens? Our amygdala fires. You're not feeling safe. you're not feeling secure. You're starting to have a sympathetic nervous system response. You get butterflies in your stomach, you feel a little weird. Maybe you leave early, maybe you kind of shut down. So that connection piece that we see in communication is extremely important. So going back to being mindful about how you're feeling and how other people might be feeling is extremely important. You ever been the new kid? I was the new kid a lot. We moved a lot when I was younger, and I was the new kid a lot. And I distinctly remember I was in 8th grade and we moved actually from Ohio to Rhode Island. And I just felt so out of place. I didn't dress like they did. I certainly didn't sound like they did. I pronounced my R's. And there was this whole, it was so different. Of course, being 14 years old, we were already messy. And I just remember this girl, Holly, came up to me in music class and she was like, "Oh, hi, you're new." And like, my name's Holly, and da-da-da. And I immediately felt better because I felt connected, right? So when we think about communication, we have to think about it as, yes, all those things you guys said, conveying information, bilateral information flow. I love that. And conveying ideas, telling people how we feel, looking for feedback. That's all correct. And it's all in how we connect and engage, which brings me to the next slide, which is actually, this is how we communicate. This is what communication looks like. And I show this a lot, and some people are like, yeah, I've seen this before, but let's dig in for a second. When we're communicating, face-to-face and some people have their cameras off, some people have their cameras on, but they're sort of like not facing the camera, so you can't really see their face. But our brains are looking for cues. We're looking for those nonverbal, and somebody in this group said verbal and nonverbal cues. We're looking for the nonverbal cues. That's how we know if we're safe, right? So body language, 55% of our interpretation and our outward communication is body language. And 38% is vocal tone. So your volume, your speed, your tone, your inflection. These are the things that are actually communicating. Only 7% when we're face to face is the words people are saying. We're gathering information from everywhere else, not just words. So here's an example. I can't see your hands, but I'm going to guess that a few of you in here are married or have a partner. So you ever say to your partner, like, "Is everything okay?" And they go, "It's fine." Are they fine? They're not fine. Their body language and their vocal tone is telling you 100% things are not fine. So even though the words coming out of their mouth are, "I'm fine," it's sort of like, "Oh yeah, you go ahead on that fishing trip this weekend. You have fun." Like, this is not, things are bad. Alarms are going off. Like, there's stuff that's not okay here. And so even though the words are, "It's fine," the body language and the vocal tone are telling you absolutely things are not fine. So, and it's sort of like, anyone have kids? Oh, maybe you have like middle schoolers or high schoolers and you ask them how that test went and they go, "Oh yeah, I did fine." And then they like walk off. Like, their body language and their vocal tone is absolutely telling you that, "Oh, I don't think that was fine. I don't think they did fine." So we are looking for body language, vocal quality more than we do words. Now, when we get on the phone or video where people don't have their cameras on, look at this. We shift. We're really listening for vocal quality. Like, we're really honing in because we don't have their face to look at. We can't measure body language. We can't see those facial expressions that people make that really tell us what's going on, or how they're feeling or whatever, because the face doesn't lie. And so I always make a joke about how, like, I can be very professional, but like, my face needs deliverance. Like, I will make facial expressions. I have no poker face. So when we're on the phone, we're listening to the words more than we are when we're face to face with people. But really, we're listening to the words in context of vocal tone. So if someone is, explaining something to you, or they're directing you to do something, we're really listening for inflection. And so an inflection matters. And I'll give you an example. So I'm going to use this sentence. I have a book. Okay. So inflection matters, where it's like, I have a book. I have a book. I have a book. Those three sentences have the same words and they have three very different meanings. And even though, you're not like writing down your notes like, oh, she meant this, but as you hear it, your brain registers that there's different meanings in the way I said those sentences. And that's what we're listening for. So again, I can't see everybody's hands, but I'll bet that you all rely really, really, really heavily on email to communicate, or Teams chats, or whatever the different chat platforms are that you have at work. So this is what happens when we go to digital. Now remember, our main source of understanding each other is from body language and vocal tone. So tell me, like, what happens here when we're just emailing out? You can put it in the chat, you can unmute yourself and tell me your thoughts, but like, what happens here when we just use digital? Misinterpretation, misread. Yup. Chaos, chaos and bilateral information. I'm liking your comments. Miscommunication, mind reading of other person's intentions, unintentional takeaways. Who just said mind reading? That was freaking brilliant. Okay, because listen, here is the golden rule of digital communication. And if you take nothing else from today, I hope you take a lot, but if you take nothing else, please take this. Digital communication is never read in the tone of the sender. It is always interpreted through the recipient's lens of insecurity. I'm going to say that again. It is never read in the tone of the sender. It is always interpreted through a lens of insecurity. And let me give you an example. Your boss sends you a Teams chat and it says, come in my office ASAP. That's all it says. You are like, oh my God. And then because now you don't know what's happening, this was a shock, your amygdala's firing, you start freaking out. Oh my God, what did I do? And then you start running through all the things like, did I send a wrong email? Did I say something wrong? Did I not do a report? Like, am I missing something? I don't know what's happening. And you start freaking out because your lens of insecurity is, my boss just sent me a one-line email or one-line text saying, come to my office ASAP. And in your brain, your interpretation, and all of our interpretations, come through a lens of insecurity. Now, your boss's tone might have been like, come to my office ASAP. I have donuts, or I've got gossip, or I have the best coffee ever and I brought you one. But that's not how you're reading it. The tone does not translate. We lose so much time. And I know email is great. Email, I mean, you can send a bit of information to a whole lot of people, right? Liz sent an email out to all y'all and more with information about this presentation. Like, how many people did she reach with one little click? It's amazing. But when we're having like actual conversation, or we need to have some, especially conflictual conversation or redirection conversations, email is not the way to go, because what ends up happening is all that tone is lost and everything is interpreted through a lens of insecurity. People freak out. Then you've got to go like calm people down because that's not what you meant. And it really becomes problematic. We see this a lot in social media. Keyboard warriors like to throw grenades from behind a screen. And there's a whole lot of missed tone. I am a very sarcastic person. Gen X represent, right? And sometimes when I make comments on random posts on social media, I'm being sarcastic, but like the people who are reading it don't know that I'm being sarcastic or facetious or whatever. And sometimes I get kind of like snarked at because people are like, I can't believe you think that. I'm like, oh my God, that was sarcasm. But there's no way to convey sarcasm or joy or excitement or concern or whatever, just digitally. So I'm not saying like, don't email ever. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is be very mindful and cognizant of what you're sending to whom and what might be interpreted on the other side. And I'm gonna pause right there and like, who has questions about this or a story or like concerns or just a thought? And while you think, I'm gonna sip my coffee. Nothing. None of y'all have email issues at all ever. It's amazing. So if this were not complicated enough, right? Then we have this. Oh, you lose time. Oh, I missed that. Oh, shoot. I saw you lose time, I think, and then I missed the other piece. Liz, I don't know if you want to read that because I can't get it back now.
It says you lose time as well as tone, I think, because there's then more back and forth.
Yes. Yes. And so sometimes it's just easier, like literally to pick up the phone and be like, hey, let's talk through this because I don't think I'm conveying myself well, or I don't think this came across the way I wanted it to come across. And this little slide right here, thank you, Liz, is we add some complications because of our personal filters and how we interpret certain things. So filters are things like age, gender, socioeconomic status, culture, sexual expression, sexual identification, race, ethnicity, all sorts of things add to our filters. So our filters, our communication filters, our existence filters come from our own experience. So, so you might read something and like to you, it's not a big deal, but to somebody else, it's a really big deal because their experience speaks to that in a different way than yours does. So there are always times when you're communicating with people, attempting to connect, and stuff just gets a little bit wonky because their filters and your filters are not the same. So when we receive messages, we are interpreting it again through that lens of insecurity or our lens of our experience, which might be different than somebody else's experience. And then when we respond, our tone gets lost. And so it's just, there's filters and interpretation. There's always areas where this communication can get muddy or misunderstood. And so the reason I bring this up is because we communicate so heavily via digital communication in whatever form. When you look at this, you can see that, oh, this could get real messy real fast. And a lot of times it does. So whomever made that comment about like, it wastes time, you're constantly going back and forth, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. There's a quick story. There's a company that I work with, and I'm coaching one of a gentleman on the C-suite, and he's new to the company. And it's an engineering firm, and he hails from the construction industry. And so he used a term, I think it was feisty. He talked about somebody being feisty and meant it in a good way. The person to whom he was referring, in their culture, feisty has actually a very negative and offensive meaning. And so that's where I got pulled in, was sort of like, you got to talk to this guy and tell him to stop using this jargon that is offensive to people. So we had to have this conversation. I showed him this slide and I said, you do not know how people are interpreting what you're saying. And if that word has a different meaning. If you have any British friends, you would never say something like, oh, I'm going to wear a fanny pack to the concert because the word Fanny is actually a super like offensive word. And so understanding the filters and interpretations is extremely important when we're communicating. Sounds like a lot of work, and it is, especially for those of you who are leaders, and you have maybe a team or two or three, maybe you're in, executive level, you got a bunch of people. You have to think about this stuff, and it requires mindfulness. To kind of illustrate, we're going to sort of shift into how we behave when we communicate. But before we do that, any thoughts or questions or ideas on this stuff that we've just covered? All right. So considering all this stuff we know about communication, and similarly, the stuff we know about how our brains work, especially when we are stressed, or confused, or managing some sort of emotional stress, it's really important for us to start thinking about our communication behaviors. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar. This is Louise Evans. She is a social psychologist. She's now based in Italy, but she's from UK. She wrote a book, and I strongly recommend you guys get this, especially if this next part of the presentation piques your interest. She wrote a book called 5 Chairs, 5 Choices. And what she does, she was at a conference for nonviolent communication. It was a 9-day conference, and she was inspired to create this. I saw this TED Talk, I don't even know how many years ago, and I was inspired to bring it into this presentation. And she's brilliant. This book is brilliant. But what we're doing is we are illustrating various behaviors that we have when we communicate, when we're communicating emotionally. And human beings are emotional creatures. We are. Even those of you who are like super stoic, you too are emotional, because you're wired to be. Unless you're a Vulcan or like part robot, like you are actually wired to be emotional. It's how we determine whether we're safe. We talked about that. Our amygdala is constantly looking for danger, or are we safe? And so Brene Brown, if you're a Brene Brown fan, she says something about how the emotional brain is at the wheel, and it has hogtied the logical brain and thrown it in the trunk. And a lot of times we see that happen. And so it's very hard when you're in an emotional moment to pull yourself out of that emotional moment and to put yourself in a logical state of mind. And we're going to kind of talk about that. So we're going to meet the chairs. And I'm going to tell you a quick story from my life. It's not a professional story. It's a family story. And then I'll sort of illustrate some stuff using the chairs. So my family moved back to Ohio. Well, me back to Ohio, in August of 2020. So like middle of the pandemic, for a bunch of reasons we moved, but my sister and her family are here. We actually live in the same neighborhood. And so it's pretty cool to be able to be that close. I have, at the time, my nephew was 24 and my niece was 14. She was the same age as my older son. And I really was trying to connect with both of them. When you live super far away, you can talk to each other on social media and stuff, but it's different when you really want to connect. So my niece and I started having auntie-niece shopping dates in places where it was safe to go. And we would go get a coffee, and then we would go to Ulta for makeup, and then we would go to like Bath and Body Works or whatever. And so we would do this quite often as we're building this relationship. So there was one, we had talked during the week about going shopping on Saturday. And so I was like, that's great. Yay. So on Friday, I had texted her in the morning and said, hey, what time do you want to go? Because I have my own kids and their activities, and I'm trying to figure out like where we're going to do, what we're going to do. And is my husband going to take him? Am I going to take him? So I text her and I don't hear back. And so I texted her later on, and I was like, hey, I just need to know what time you want to go, because I have to figure some stuff out over here for tomorrow. Didn't hear anything. So then I text again in the afternoon, and I was like, hey, I really need to know what time we're going tomorrow, because I have to make plans over here. And I didn't hear anything. So I sent my last text right around dinner time. saying, could you please, and of course my tone is changing every time I'm sending a text. It was like, could you please get back to me and let me know if we're even doing this thing tomorrow? And I don't hear back. So at about, I'm trying to figure out like how I'm going to get this girl's attention and what is going on. And I have a few choices. So let's walk through those choices. My first choice. Are you freaking kidding me? You have your phone in your hand all the time. You are constantly on Instagram. You are constantly on Discord and Snapchat, and you're ignoring me. I'm going to take you out and spend money on you and spend time with you, and you're going to ignore me? Nice. Second choice. Oh my God, she does not want to go out with me. She doesn't want to go shopping with me. Like, why would she want to go shopping with me? I'm kind of old. She probably hates my music. And do I smell? I don't know. The third choice. Hold on. Hold on. You do not know what is going on here. You don't know where she is and what's happening. Don't jump to conclusions. Fourth choice. I have not gotten to spend a lot of time with Sydney. I've not gotten to see her. And it's really important to me that we're able to connect and build this relationship and that I can be a strong female figure in her life. Her mom is very strong, but it's good to have like that strong auntie too. And I'm really hopeful that we can build that relationship. And the last choice. What does she need? What does she need from me? And what can I do to provide what she needs? So I'm like sitting there grappling in my brain about what to do in this situation and feeling really conflicted across the board when my phone rings and it's my sister. And I answer and she said, hi, in that voice that tells me that something is amiss. And she said, Sydney is not going shopping with you tomorrow. She's not going anywhere tomorrow. She is grounded, and perhaps maybe next weekend you guys can go do something if she makes it through this weekend. So apparently Sydney was chatting with boys online. It was a whole thing. So she had gotten grounded and she didn't have her phone. And my sister had her phone. My sister wasn't looking at her phone. And so I could have potentially absolutely annihilated any opportunity for a relationship with her if I reacted from this chair. Could you imagine if I sent her a text saying, you're a selfish brat. You have no respect. You are blah, 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 blah. Because I made an assumption. I made an assumption that she was ignoring me and I was going to let her have it from the red chair. Or I was going to beat myself up about how I'm a crappy aunt and she doesn't want to hang out with me and maybe I smell and she hates my music and she doesn't like my car or whatever. And I would have beat myself up for no reason. So let's meet these chairs. The red chair is what we call the attack chair. In this chair, we love to blame, complain, gossip, and judge. We judge in this chair. This is the chair where we lash out because emotionally we don't know what's going on. Remember, our logical brain is like hogtied in the trunk. We are defending ourselves preemptively. We actually don't know what's going on, but we have gotten emotionally triggered and we're going to let somebody have it. This chair is also the I'm right chair. I don't know if any of you ever do stuff like when somebody makes a comment and you correct them. And you're not correcting them for them to actually learn. You're correcting them because you feel threatened in some way and you need to be right. That's the red chair. This is where gossip comes from. This is where when people make assumptions where they don't like somebody at work and they kind of lash out, that's this chair. The yellow chair is our retreat chair. This is where we feel imposter syndrome. We feel weak or stupid. We have a ton of self-doubt and we're victims. I just can't win. The thing with the yellow and the red chairs is they are reaction chairs. There's no mindfulness at all in these chairs. We are reacting in these chairs. And what's interesting is when we're in these chairs, we'll go back and forth. We'll lash out, then we feel awful and we beat ourselves up. And then we feel bad because now we feel super weak. So we have to lash out so we can have power again. We will go back and forth in these chairs. But then there is the green chair, which is our pause chair. This is the, wait a minute, I do not know what's happening. What am I telling myself? What am I thinking is happening? Am I right or am I making an assumption? We're curious in this chair. We're interested. We're detaching ourselves from emotion. This is how we start to get into our logical brain. And we ask, what's really going on? The blue chair is fascinating, and it's a really hard chair. This is what I call our build chair. This is where we become self-aware. We look at our boundaries and other people's boundaries. We become more confident and we have self-respect, and we have the conversation about, what do I need here? This isn't being angry. Like, you can be angry and be in the blue chair, but this is more about, wait, what am I feeling and why? When you feel reactive in the red chair, there's a reason that you're feeling that way. So the blue chair is actually for you to go, whoa, why am I feeling like this? And in the case of my niece, it was, I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling ignored. I'm feeling unimportant. That scares me because what I'm really looking for here is this connection with her. And if I'm not feeling it, then my reaction propensity is to lash out and be mad. But really here is, oh, I really need to know what I need in this moment. And the purple chair is just as, if not more difficult than the blue. It's the provide chair. This is where we are socially aware. We have vision and big picture understanding of what's going on. We become strategic and we practice empathy in this chair. This is the what do they need chair. Let's talk about empathy for a second. I would imagine if I polled the audience and said, what does empathy mean? A lot of you would say something like, it's the ability to walk in somebody else's shoes. And we hear that a lot. And that's kind of been like, that's the answer. That's what empathy is. But I have to say that there is a fundamental flaw in that definition. And that is this: it's impossible for us to walk in someone else's shoes experientially, because we come from our own lens of experience, right? So like, it's impossible for me to walk in the shoes of a homeless person, or a trans woman, or a Black man, or a Mexican migrant, or anybody right now who is in Gaza. Like, I cannot walk in their shoes. I have never experienced that. So what empathy actually is the ability to listen and believe without judgment. Because when we try to walk in someone else's shoes without that experience, we come to understanding them through a lens of pity or disdain. And there's no room in empathy for pity or disdain. So it is quite literally believing somebody's story without judgment. That goes back to what we talked about in mindfulness. No judging. And that's super, super hard, because when we meet people who are battling like addiction or domestic violence or whatever, and we can't understand, or maybe you can, but we can't necessarily understand their predicament, we assign judgment to it. Even though we say, God, I'm so sorry you're going through this. In the back of our brain, we're judging. And so the empathy piece is to not do that, and just to listen and understand and believe people where they are. So now I want to open, there's always questions about the chairs. And I hope you guys have questions about the chairs, but I want to open this up to, did I lose you anywhere? What questions do you have? What thoughts do you have about this? Did something make you laugh? Did something make you think? So I'm opening this up. Please ask questions. is the goal to live in green through purple? Katie, that's a really good question. And I guess, thanks, Nargis. I guess the goal is to be mindful. So being a human is really hard because we're so emotional. And again, we're built that way. Like it's not like bad or shameful. Like we are built that way. But the challenge is to be mindful. So, I've been in a mindful practice for a while, and I still will find myself plopping right down in the red chair, maybe to recognize red and yellow and move away. And that's what I was getting to. I love that you said that, because you're gonna end up in the red chair. You're gonna end up in the yellow chair. The purpose, the goal, I guess, Katie, to like answer that is really to recognize where you are. That's the mindfulness piece. That's the observing, the awareness that's rising, like, God, I'm feeling so stabby. What is happening? And it's like, oh, I'm actually feeling insulted, invalidated, rejected, ignored. I'm feeling all these things. And you're going to be in the red chair for a second, but as long, like feel what you're going to feel. You're never not going to do that. But it's, what do you do with the feelings when you're feeling them? Do you just go explosive and react? Or do you go, oh my God, I'm not feeling friendly. I'm going to excuse myself for a minute and get yourself to the green chair. Or like I said, you can be angry in the blue chair. I have a whole different story, but I don't want to waste our time. But like where I have been invalidated in the workplace, I work in academia. It's a hard place to work. And so sometimes there are egos that clash. And so you can be in the blue chair and say things like, I do not appreciate the way you're speaking to me and the way you're invalidating my intelligence and the work that I'm doing, and I'm going to stop this conversation. Where in the red chair, you would come out with a slew of cuss words and maybe throw a chair. Like, this is what we're talking about. So like, you're going to end up in the red chair. You're going to end up in the yellow chair. But if you can be mindful and figure out that, oh, this is what I'm feeling, that's the goal. And then if you can get to the green chair and be like, do I understand what's happening here? Yes, indeed. My colleague is totally invalidating all the research that I've done for the past 2 years. I'm going to get myself in the blue chair and set a boundary. I hope that answered that well, Katie. What other thoughts or questions do you have? It's important to pause before responding. Yeah. And Carolyn, what's your comment? So yes, it is important to pause before responding. Absolutely. 100%, especially if you've got a hot email that you want to send, because you can never take that back. But Carolyn, what's your comment?
Hi, so I did turn on my video, but I don't know if it's going to come through. I think how you can respond has a lot to do with the employment sector you're in, because I can tell you that the first thing you said, where it was just kind of validating yourself, would not fly where I work, which is a local government entity. You are just not allowed to come out and really complain about anything, even if it's valid. The only time you can do that is if you take your issue up with your immediate supervisor in a special one-on-one session and talk about, I felt the public works director was because I have literally gotten fired for saying things in a group setting where I was just saying, you can't do this because our maintenance guys are not going to be able to, handle that. I do park construction for a living. And so that's what we've been asking for months. And that really should have been reflected. And that person who was a consultant went and complained to, some city higher ups, and basically led to my being discharged. So you have to be really careful about what sector you're in and how free of flow of anything goes. And the hard part of that is you're in the red chair a lot. And
I'm,
so
yeah,
you basically have to go home to get into your green or blue chair and walk the
right.
dog.
Oh my gosh, I love that you just brought that up because you're right. There are some areas where there are some employment sectors where it's much more difficult to be outspoken. But you still, like when you said, go to your supervisor and have a one-on-one and did it up, that's still blue chair. Could you imagine if you like totally freaked out in the red chair and like what you said actually in that meeting was very blue chair. It was very much like, oh, well, you know what? We have to consider X, Y, and Z. It was actually blue and purple. It was the indigo chair, where you're looking at all sort, all the spherical stuff. And somebody apparently got a hair across their butt and got offended and they got in the red chair. That consultant got right in the red chair.
Yeah.
And went and had a fit, right? And then unfortunately you paid for it, which really sucks. And so it's interesting that you bring that up because I work with a lot of municipalities, states, cities, and municipalities. And I run into this stuff a lot where it's discouraged to have banter about what could be better or whatever. And that's when I know that that whoever is in charge has a really big ego and a ton of insecurities, and that's where that comes from.
Well, I wonder if it's somewhat generational too, because I'm in my 60s and we were raised to be very, bow to authority kind of thing. And I think the younger generation is a lot more in your face, and it may evolve into that being a little more acceptable, which I think is a good thing to a point. I mean, you obviously don't want to do a personal attack. You don't want to come across as a total negative Nelly, but it can be really, even going to the supervisor they have an ego. And so then even complaining about something that doesn't have anything to do with them, like I basically got told, well, I have personal relationships with all of the department heads and you're just way too critical.
Yeah, so that's all red chair thinking, right? That's like, oh, I'm insulted and I'm going to lash out however I can. That's not mindful thinking at all, where it's like, okay, well, I mean, yes, I do have these personal relationships with people, but they can still come off as jackasses to other people. And we should probably look at that. But that takes a lot of humility and it takes a lot of intent. And so not everybody practices that, which is why I do this. So I can bring the ideas to people, like, so to say, to you, like, you're not nuts and you didn't do anything wrong. And I'm really sorry that you worked for a bunch of egomaniacal jerks that like took your job away, because how dare you question somebody's policy, right? So you did what you needed to do, which was that blue purple chair area. And unfortunately you worked with a bunch of red chairs. And so for the leaders in the room, like, don't be the red chair person, because it ruins people's lives and it like ruins culture. And I'm working right now with the Department of Transportation for a state that has some pretty significant corruption. And I'm like, and as a consultant, I can go in and be like, oh, hi, here's all the stuff. And are you recognizing this? And here's an example. And like, they can fire me if they want to, but they signed a pretty big contract, so they don't want to. But like, I can do that and make people look at themselves in a different way. This is all self-awareness and really bring them to, you're doing things the way you've always done it because it's just easier than making changes. But what you just said about generations is spot on. So for those of you in leadership, and I think all of you kind of are in leadership, what the young millennials and the Gen Zs need is not what the boomers provide, and the Gen Xers who are in leadership positions are having to shift. And there has to be a shift, or else you're not going to be able to hire, period, or you won't be able to retain. And I get a lot of flack for that, where they're like, well, that's stupid, they shouldn't dictate, blah blah blah. And it's like, well, maybe they shouldn't, but they're the ones who are going to come in on the employment roles, and you've got to be able to provide. So the whole do as I say sort of thing kind of needs to shift. So you made, that was a great comment, because it kind of leads into thinking about, what do you need to do differently? What do you need to consider? Getting in those blue and purple chairs. What do my employees need? What do I need? How do I need to lead? How do I need to know that I'm doing this right? But what do they need so that they can be guided and go do the job and be productive and make my life as a leader easier, getting into those chairs is only going to help you. Even though sometimes we feel really like powerful when we're in that red chair and we lash out, but the damage done on the other side is really hard to reconstruct once it's broken. Other thoughts or questions? Anything in the chat, Liz?
Not yet.
Okay. Y'all, I hope this was helpful. I hope that somewhere during this, a light bulb went off and you were like, ooh, I never thought about that, or oh my God. Or like the first time I saw the TED Talk that goes along with Louise Evans' thing, I just remember laughing hysterically, like, oh, the amount of times I throw myself in the yellow chair is really embarrassing. But understanding that that we're human, we're gonna be emotional, we're supposed to be, that's how we're wired. But then understanding that you can actually pause and ask yourself some questions. Mainly, do I actually know what's going on here? Am I making assumptions? What's actually going on? And then moving from that place will really help. So I really appreciate your time and that you guys are all here. And it was so nice to chat with you. Thank you for your questions and your comments. And you know, I think Liz has my info. So if there's stuff that's like playing on your brain and you want to ask questions later, you can absolutely like email and let me know. And I'm more than happy to chat through this stuff. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that terrific presentation. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We hope to see you next month with the April installment on measurement system analysis and process capabilities in their symbiotic relationship on April 17th. A little different topic, but it still should be amazing. Also, if you are interested in Women in Leadership Conference, it is on October 10th and 11th at the Kensington Hotel in Ann Arbor this year. If you'd like more information, please email nexus-wil@umich.edu or visit our website. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Bye, thank you.